Thank you, Sir Robert. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this morning. Now, imagine you're at home and you've just cleared away the dinner and there's a knock at the door and you look at your partner. Are you expecting anyone? No. You answer the door and a police officer is standing there to deliver the most dreadful news that anyone could ever hear, that your son or your daughter has been killed in a car accident. Now, I'm sure everybody here would agree that the loss of a child is the very worst thing that could happen to anyone. It goes against the very order of things, and no family ever recovers from their loss. And sadly, Sir Robert, I've had a number of grieving parents come to my surgeries over the last 12 years to talk about the terrible impact of the death of a child, either as a passenger in a car or whilst driving alone or with friends. My heart goes out to every parent who's ever had to receive this terrible news, and in particular to my constituents Chris and Nicole Taylor, who lost their beloved daughter Rebecca in 2008. Chris and Nicole came to see me soon after I became an MP in 2010, and I've tried to support their brilliant campaign that seeks to significantly reduce the risk of any other young, inexperienced driver dying on our roads. Sir Robert, evidence submitted by the Department for Transport to the Transport Committee's Young and Novice Driver Inquiry in 2020 revealed that whilst young drivers account for only 7% of full driving licence holders, in 2019 they were involved in 23% of fatal and serious collisions in the UK. And in 2021, the AA surveyed their members, asking them what they thought were the greatest safety risks to teenagers. The responses clearly came back that members thought drugs, gun and knife crime were, in their view, the greatest risk to young people. But in fact, road deaths are by far and away the greatest risk, at 17% of deaths of 5 to 19-year-olds, compared to 9% of all deaths being alcohol and drug-related and 7% due to homicide. Road deaths clearly pose the much bigger risk. Now my constituents, Chris and Nicole, have joined forces with Rad Seeger, another constituent, who campaigned so tirelessly with Harry Dunn's family to achieve justice for Harry following his tragic road death in 2019. Their campaign is calling for new arrangements for young people as they learn to drive and become used to our busy and dangerous roads. First, they're recommending that any learner driver should complete a minimum learning period of 50 hours driving or 6 months in time before they can take their practical driving test. During this time, they should complete a logbook of driving under different road and weather conditions. Second, they recommend that young drivers who have just passed their driving test should wait for a period of time, up to a year, before being allowed to carry other young passengers. Statistics have shown that young drivers are more likely to be involved in a collision with a similar-aged passenger in the car. In 2016, 25% of casualties for those aged 17 to 24 were passengers. Of course.
Thank you, Sir Robert. Can I thank my right friend for raising that point around what are so-called graduated driving licences, and can I just lend my support to her calls for that? Emily Challen in my constituency, whose parents live in Normanton, she was killed when her friend had only had a driving licence for 8 months, and 3 of them were in the car, and they drove tragically into the back of a HGV. We need to protect our young people because the significance and the responsibility of driving others is far beyond what I believe I recognised to be the case when I was a young driver. And as she says quite clearly, the stats show that we need to protect our young people so that they can protect their friends and loved ones. So can I ask the Minister to reflect graduated and live driving licences, particularly his comments when he responds?
Well, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for telling the story of her constituents. And across the country, Sir Robert, there are far, far too many similar cases, tragic cases. So going back to the recommendations of the campaign of my constituents, Their third recommendation is that young drivers should not be allowed to drive between midnight and 4 a.m. The risk of a young driver being involved in a collision is 8 times higher between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on both weekdays and weekends. Now, my constituents and I, of course, recognise that there will need to be exceptions to any such restrictions, such as for young parents taking their own children out in a car, or indeed for young people who are travelling to work between the hours of midnight and 4 a.m. And that would be perfectly easily created as exceptional circumstances. And I have to say, Sir Robert, I have every sympathy with the aims of my constituents' campaign, and I do urge the Minister to look at the merits of these modest but potentially incredibly effective measures. And then a further recommendation that has been made to me by many others is that the use of black boxes for young drivers should be compulsory when they're first on the roads. I certainly will.
A little late, I had a chemotherapy session, guys, and it overran, so I'm sorry for that. But the Right Honourable Friend knows I'm a great supporter of this. The first 1,000 miles that a young person drives are the crucial ones. Absolutely crucial. Anything we can do, in a sense, to delay, to help, support, and make sure that they're safe. And of course, she will know better than anyone else here, Sir Robert, that this is the biggest killer worldwide. People forget. It's not any disease. It's the biggest kill of children and young people worldwide is death on the road.
Well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for his point and for rushing across here straight from his procedure, and that I think demonstrates his great regard for the importance of this subject. So thank you to him. So, Sir Robert, black boxes are the good spy in your car, and they record data about a driver's driving style, such as whether the driver is taking corners safely and whether they're keeping to the speed limit. And not only that, but data from the British Insurance Brokers Association says that these black boxes in cars can result in savings of more than £1,000 a year in insurance costs for some young drivers. So a real win-win. And in evidence to the Transport Select Committee in 2021, telematics insurer provider Insure the Box confirmed that its technology has assisted 80,000 young drivers to reduce speeding per mile by 21%, and they estimate that that's resulted in 700 fewer crashes and 22 fewer serious injuries. Now, the Minister will, of course, be aware that only recently the concept of graduated driver's licences was the subject of a full Transport Select Committee inquiry, and that took place in 2021. The GDL, the Graduated Driver's Licence, proposes a minimum supervised learning period, an intermediate licence period that places quite strong restrictions on the newly qualified driver, and then a full unrestricted driving licence only available after completion of the first 2 stages. International evidence was put forward to the committee at the time, showing that the GDL can reduce collisions and trauma from accidents involving young drivers by 20 to 40%. But of course, the main concerns about GDLs are that it reduces access to employment and education, that it impacts on young people living and working in rural areas, and that the restrictions may be hard to enforce. Nevertheless, the Transport Select Committee's report recommended that the Department for Transport should resume a study into the social and economic consequences of GDL, which it committed to in its 2019 Road Safety Statement. Now, many people will argue, and indeed the Minister may seek to argue, that a GDL is not enforceable, but in a direct response to that, I would say that in the vast majority of cases, young people learning to drive are extremely sensible, if not actually a bit scared of getting behind the wheel, and they have no desire to crash their car, and they certainly have no desire to harm themselves or cause harm to any other young person. So whilst there may understandably be some reluctance to changing the rules, it is nevertheless my view that young people would, on the whole, comply with those new rules around learning to drive, and as a result we would see a massive decrease in the number of deaths and injuries on our roads. Now, Sir Robert, I am so grateful to the many across this House and the other place, so many of whom have shown a significant interest in this area. And I'm sorry that this debate is, in fact, relatively short, because there were many who were keen to contribute to it. I'm particularly delighted that the noble lady, Baroness Jenkin of Kennington, will also be tabling a question in the other place on this same topic, demonstrating her concern and interest. And I also do want to finally pay tribute to all those parents, including Chris and Nicole, who have shown such determination, and Charlotte Charles and Tim Dunn for their passion in making sure that no other family has to suffer the terrible losses that they have all endured. Thank you.
The is that this House has considered the matter of improving driver safety. Minister Richard Holden.
Thank you very much, Sir Robert, and I'm very grateful to the Right Honourable Lady for opening this debate on improving driver safety and for her sensitive speech. And it is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship today, Sir Robert. I'd like to begin by offering my condolences to the bereaved families who are the driving force behind this debate today, to both Mrs. Sharon Huddleston, who tragically lost her daughter Caitlin, and to Chris and Nicole, who are here in the hall, who also lost their 18-year-old daughter Rebecca, both in road traffic incidents. And also I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Rutland and Melton for mentioning her constituent, Emily Channon, as well. Sadly, I too, as a constituency MP, am not a stranger to helping bereaved families in similar circumstances either. I continue to support my constituents, John and Karen Rowlands, whose son Andrew was killed when an acquaintance was able to purchase a car and drive it with tragic consequences for Andrew without even holding a driving licence. To lose a child is the worst thing imaginable, and I commend all the families on their bravery and determination, actually, in wanting to do some good to come from their grief. And the Right Honourable Lady is quite right about road deaths being the greatest killer and also the greatest threat to the lives of young people, something my honourable friend from Huddersfield and I have spoken about before. Any deaths or serious injuries on our roads are unacceptable, and our deepest condolences go to all road collision victims and their families. And let me reassure honourable and right honourable members here today that the government takes road safety for all road users very seriously. It is at the core of what the Department of Transport's agenda is, and it's something I'm honoured to be working on, and I'm committed to doing as much as I can to improve in the future. Of course I will.
Robert, my intervention is really merely to make a plea that since we organised, when I was a very young MP, the compulsory seatbelt legislation and the ban children from being counted in cars without restraint, we have been a very good example. Would you agree? We have been a wonderful exemplar of good practice, but it's slipping a bit. Not as much interest in Parliament as there used to be in road safety, and certainly our figures after plateauing are getting a little worse. Would you agree it's worrying when 30% of the deaths in cars at the moment are people not wearing their seatbelts?
I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for raising that point. He and I were both at the reception recently around that, and it is quite clear 30% of deaths related to seatbelts, when they're compulsory to be worn, is totally unacceptable. We have made great progress in this country, but we do need to do more. He's right about plateauing, and that's something that I will address a little bit later in my speech. But I am glad that honourable members are present here today for this short debate, all committed to this issue, and I'd urge other honourable members to join with my right honourable friend and perhaps get involved in his campaigns as well. In November in Portcullis House, I presented the annual Livia Award, which was established in 1999 in memory of George and Giuletta's 16-year-old daughter Livia, who was killed in Enfield by a driver who mounted a pavement while she was walking home. This award gives recognition of excellence in road fatality or serious injury investigation and contribution to the investigation through family liaison work by police officers in the Met. I learned of the challenges faced by officers in bringing people to justice who have been driving in a criminal manner, leading to death or serious injury of others, and gained an insight into the dedication required to effectively support families who have suffered from bereavement from a dangerous driver. And I now know as a constituency MP how important that family liaison work is. In December, I was fortunate to spend a day with Sussex Police to see firsthand the work that they're doing on drink and drug enforcement, another important aspect of road safety, as part of their wider drink drive campaign. And in fact, their Chief Constable is the lead on road safety nationally alongside their Police and Crime Commissioner. And the Chief Constable has a personal story herself, her father having been the victim of a road traffic incident when she was a teenager. All of from the constituency work, from my work as an MP in this House, and from my role now as a Minister, all have enabled me to gain a greater understanding of the operational and strategic challenges faced in this area. And I am committed to ensuring that the government is able to support in the best possible way everything we can to reduce. I'll give way to my little friend.
This is being so generous. But before he concludes, can I just remind him, and he knows this, that BREAK in my constituency, national organisation, supports victims of road accidents, road deaths. And I do hope that he will come to Huddersfield soon and visit and meet the wonderful people that run that lovely charity.
No, I think my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise BREAK, who do such great and amazing work. And I'm sure my officials have noted his request for a visit, and they know that I'm very keen to get out and about as much as possible. So I hope to be able to visit my honourable friend in his constituents and meet the campaigners at BREAK. So, you know, I'm committed, and the government is, to being able to support families, but also, crucially, to make a difference to deaths and serious injuries in the first place. And as the honourable member for Huddersfield knows, I had the pleasure of attending the Project Edward parliamentary reception with him to present the government's views and hopefully outline the keenness that we have to act. I have learned a great deal from listening to other members, and the honourable member highlighted in his speech how important, for example, seatbelt compliance could be in making a difference, and I'm grateful to him to be here today as well. That's why I will indeed give way to my honourable friend.
I'm very grateful to him for giving way. We are rightly placing the emphasis. It is often misplaced in discussions about road safety, about the roads being responsible rather than drivers. So it's right that we are talking here about how we make drivers safer. But I would take this opportunity to urge the Minister. There are some junctions and roads that are inherently dangerous. The A52 at Bottisford in my constituency is one. But the problem is when you represent a rural area, such as my right honourable friend and I do, when the way they make decisions, Highways England, about whether or not to invest in safety upgrades to a junction depends on how many fatalities take place there. Now, if my junction outside my small village of Bottisford was actually put outside Loughborough, there would be far more accidents because there is a far greater population using that junction. So would he kindly, and I know we've discussed this before, look at taking rurality into account when deciding whether or not the number of fatalities is significant enough to invest in infrastructure upgrades and safety upgrades?
No, and I think my honourable friend makes a very important point. As somebody who grew up in a rural area myself, with one of those jobs, as my honourable friend mentioned in her speech, which actually finished after midnight but had to drive home from, and actually and now represents a rural constituency where this is a big concern to my constituents as well. Both that they want road safety, it's the biggest killer of young people in my constituency, as it is probably in everybody's constituency. But also they want road safety, but they also want to have that sort of safe and sensible approach has been outlined by my honourable friend. And I'll come in, as I move towards my concluding remarks, it's something I'll also pick up on the details of what she's been proposing with the family here today, but absolutely my honourable friend for Rutland and Melton is right to point out that rurality, this is a particular issue in rural areas, and we have to do more to make rural roads particularly safer as well. That's why, as part of our consideration on a call for evidence on road traffic offences and their policing, we are considering testing all sorts of different proposals, but one of them is going to be around non-seatbelt wearing and make it an endorsable offence, which I think should also help to try and squeeze out a very small number of people who don't wear seatbelts, but obviously for death and serious injury is a major concern. And that is an especial concern on some of our rural roads as well, where people think, well, there's nobody else on the other side of the road, I might be all right. Turning onto the subject of the debate today, though, we know that young drivers are massively overrepresented in collisions, as my right honourable friend made clear with the statistics, not just here, but also around the world. Amongst the OECD countries, road traffic crashes are the single greatest cause of death for all 15 to 24-year-olds. And in the UK, as honourable friends have mentioned, young drivers account for around 6% of licence holders, but around 22% of fatal and serious collisions, and that's from 2021. Fatalities have fallen for young drivers over the decades, around half what they were in 1990, but we're still seeing far too many young drivers killed, 78 in 2021, and we've got much more to do to address this issue. And although these reductions are encouraging, we really are not complacent. A focus for this government is to make roads safer for all users, but especially for new and novice drivers. This group was one of the four key road user groups outlined in the road safety statement in 2019 and continues to be so. The department's broad aim for young road users is to improve road safety through both technology, as my right honourable friend mentioned, and also through research which we're conducting at the moment, and by developing better learning opportunities and targeted messaging for them. We've made good progress with the actions set out in the road safety statement. We've commissioned research to explore the potential of graduated learning scheme, which was awarded to the Driving Instructors Association. This is now a modular learning project which uses a comparative trial to assess whether a modular approach to learning is feasible to deliver and whether it can improve novice driver competence and safety. The trial commenced in spring 2021 and the findings are expected later this year. And I'm sure that honourable members here will be very interested in the results of that. Of course I will.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. What form will the results of that survey take? Will there be a written ministerial statement? Will he come to the House and tell people what the result of it is? Because obviously that is absolutely key to what action we take going forward.
It's a very good question, my honourable friend asked. I will write to her exactly in what form we're expecting it to take, but I'd certainly be delighted to address the House on the issue because it's something I'm particularly interested in. And so I will write to her, and perhaps we could do another Westminster Hall debate at that stage after that, if there isn't going to be a formal statement on the floor of the House. The DVSA continues to ensure that practical driving tests allows the assessment of candidates' ability to drive safely and responsibly, and they have reviewed their national standards to ensure they reflect what is required of safer and responsible drivers and riders. And their Learning to Drive publication was refreshed and published alongside the online driving record in 2020, and last year refreshed guidance to help approved driving instructors to conduct mock tests was also published. The pinnacle of our work on improving driver safety for young and novice drivers is, of course, the department's £2 million research project, Driver 2020, and around 16,000 new and 12,000 novice drivers taken part in this project, which began in 2019, and trialled 5 non-legislative measures to help understand what works best to improve this learning and pre-test experiences for young drivers. That is a huge amount of young people to reach out to, and we've researched so far involving guardians with mentor agreement mutually agreed driving restrictions if applicable, a logbook, as the Honourable Lady mentioned, to record the amount of time in different learning situations, including driving at night or on motorways, a telematics-based app to record and coach the driving behaviour of these, both obviously mentioned by the Right Honourable Lady in her speech, but also extra classroom-based tuition to enhance young drivers' learning and extra hazard perception training to help young drivers understand risky situations on our roads. And the honourable members have mentioned that first 1,000 miles. I know from my own personal experience, once you've driven in one road condition, it can be very different as a young driver, driving in a totally novel road condition. So I think this is particularly important for young drivers as well. Of course I will.
Can I just press him slightly on that driving in different conditions? Is that intended to become a prerequisite prior to being let loose on the roads?
We're looking at this evidence and this research at the moment. What we will see is what works best, and that's what we want to do. Is there will be some things which I'm sure could be superb and maybe the best thing to do. Others may not be as suitable. So when the research is published, we'll be able to see what's the most effective. And it will probably be a combination of measures, in honesty. But I don't want to prejudge the report. Of course.
Very quick point.
Yeah.
Minister, a very tiny one.
Yeah.
If we're going to have good behaviour on the roads, we do need the fact that laws are enforced. And will he talk to the Home Secretary about more police on the road? People don't see police cars on the road anymore.
I thank the Honourable Friend for making that point. Enforcement is obviously a major issue, and it can't just be done by ANPR cameras. When I was down in Sussex and recently looking at the impact that they're having on drink and drug driving, those enforcement issues are particularly important. And it is about more police, which the government is putting in, but it's also, particularly on drug driving, it's also about being able to get very quick processing, because sometimes the processing times can be longer than the charge period for some of these offences. So it's a combination of different enforcement measures, but the Honourable Member is right to raise them. As I was mentioning, all the potential issues which are being looked at, all potentially valuable tools in helping our young drivers as they embark on their lifelong road safety journey. Due to the pandemic, sadly, the research had to pause. That's why we expect the final report to be published by the DIA later this year, and that will help inform our young driver policy going forwards. Now, turning to the future work, the Department is working on the Road Safety Strategic Framework, which is also aiming to publish this in the spring. The framework will establish a safe system approach. As part of this, we are considering what might be appropriate and supporting indicators on casualty reduction. The key principle of the safe system approach is to recognise that people make mistakes and that things go wrong. The approach accepts that responsibility is shared, as my honourable friend from Rutland and Melton mentioned, and that collisions are a result of a combination of factors which can be mitigated. The Road Safety Strategic Framework will provide the structure needed to deliver a safe system approach effectively and efficiently. This approach is proven and accepted in many other sectors, including health, safety and public health. Health and safety and public health. It is already adopted as best practice in other countries, which has subsequently gone on to make significant reductions in road deaths and casualties. Safer road users are one of the 5 pillars of a safe system approach, and therefore young and novice drivers will of course feature within this framework, and too will rural road users, as has been mentioned by honourable members too. It is on rural roads that many of our young and novice drivers are tragically killed and seriously injured, often with driving tests in suburban locations, and then move out onto those rural roads in constituencies like mine. Safer roads and roadsides also form one of the safe system pillars, and since 2018 the Department for Transport has provided more than £100 million for the award-winning Safer Roads Fund to improve the top 50 most dangerous roads in England. Many of these rural roads and many of those first round schemes are now complete, and all of those in round 2 are underway, and at some point I hope to be able to announce more of those, because they are very important for improving some of those specific junctions and roads. I hope all of this excellent work by not only the Department and DVSA, but in conjunction with research partners, TRL, the Road Safety Foundation and others, and also so much from voluntary organisations as well, does indeed reassure honourable members that the Department does take driver safety very seriously. And I look forward to sharing more of our future plans with all of you on all these different aspects in due course.
The question is, this House has considered the matter of improving driver safety. As many as that opinion say aye. Aye. And to the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.